Hey, I'm Kevin,
And I'm Frank.
and we're going to take you behind the headstock today and talk about the untold story about the Les Paul Coppertop.
Go Behind the Headstock with Kevin and Frank, two ex-Gibson employees talking about guitars and the guitar industry with an inside perspective.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Kevin,
Hey, and I'm Frank.
and we're two ex-Gibson guys. We worked together. Well, we've known each other for about 30 years, worked with each other at Gibson for so many years, right?
Yeah, I had 28 years in.
I had 15, and well, Frank and I worked on a lot of guitars together. We developed a bunch of models, and there's a whole bunch of stories that just don't get told out there about a lot of guitars, right?
Yeah, and a lot of myth stories too.
That's true.
People's misconceptions. So,
Yep. So we're going to take you behind the headstock and start off episode 1 here with a story that might not sound too interesting, the Les Paul Classic Coppertop, but trust me, there's a lot going on behind the headstock with this one, right?
yeah, it kind of explains, why it came about and the process of developing guitars and what we went through as far as production wise and as far as marketing wise. And well, you can speak to that, Kev, a little more, but
Yeah.
it's the whole story of the process.
All right, so in order to talk about the Les Paul Coppertop, we got to talk about the Les Paul Gold Top first. But before we do that, let's give the audience a little context about how electric guitars are made at Gibson and where they're made, right?
Okay, yeah.
So Frank and I both worked at Gibson USA on Massman Drive, right?
Right.
Now, if I remember, some of the old timers called it the electric plant.
Right. Sure.
At one point, it was the electric plant, right?
Well, kind of. It's still, it
still
maintained that out. When between Montana being the acoustic plant, that's kind of when the split would have happened, because at first in 75, when they came to Nashville or whenever that was, I think it was 75, everything was there: acoustics, ES, everything, banjos. They made it all at the Nashville facility. And then it all kind of, split up as it grew.
Over the years, like we would make divisions out of Gibson Electric or Gibson USA, right?
Yeah, out of a Gibson, and making acoustic guitars in Nashville wasn't really any fun.
Hard, right?
There, the humidity and the environment just not laid itself out to be productive. So I'm sure that's why they looked at Montana being a nice dry air, and that's a great place to make them out there.
Stay away from mid-70s acoustics, right?
Well, yeah, I would guess. I don't know how they got them out. If there are any left, that didn't warp or split, or I guess by the time it made it out, it must have been really cured and really good at that point.
I guess it was really well made, right? If it made the cut.
Had a lot of loss, had a lot of problems with them in production. So,
right.
And it made sense to move it out. And then kind of the same thing, the way the Custom Shop grew and split as well.
Yep. So Custom Shop came out of the Gibson USA plant and was 2 doors down from Gibson USA, right? And they made electric guitars there. The historic collection was run out of there. And in between Gibson USA and Custom Shop was Epiphone.
Right.
All in a row on Massman Drive, right?
Yeah.
So
for a while, yeah, Custom wound up moving, but yeah.
Yep. So around the time, though, that the Coppertop came into the line, Custom Shop was probably running about 60 guitars a day, right?
Yeah, if that, really.
And then Gibson USA, I remember it being as high as 800 a day, but what would you say the average was? Around 500-600 a day?
Yeah, we got up, I think the highest we got was 750 that I remembered. But yeah, the goal when I started in the late 80s was like 1 per person per day. So, three anywhere from 300 to 400 to 500. the goal, the goal was 8 hours per unit. So one person per guitar, one guitar per person per day.
Interesting.
So
okay.
that's how you could add the an easy way to figure out the hours per unit. If you had 400 employees, you did 400 guitars, and it was 8 hours.
Right.
So that's kind of was the basic, but most of the time it ran about between 3 and 500 was real comfortable for that size building. With the building actually, grew to be too small, or we grew to make the building kind of small. It was pretty tight.
Right.
When I left in 2015, it was getting tight in there,
Yep. And then
So-
over at Epiphone, they were importing everything. Sometimes they would do some special runs in the USA for Epiphone, but for the most part, everything came in containers to trucks. They would tweak them in the warehouse, and from what I remember, they were doing about 15,000 units a month, which is about 700 a day.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't know if that was a consistent number, but I remember there were certain months we were doing 15,000 units a day. That might have been in Q4, and we were doing a lot of the Epiphone gig rigs or the player packs.
Right.
But still,
Christmas deals.
yep,
Yeah.
tons and tons and tons of guitars. So
Yeah.
anyway, so those were the three divisions basically making solid body guitars. Around this point, Memphis did exist, but they were making, that was specifically for hollow bodies. So we really won't talk about them in this episode. We'll cover them in a later episode. But so going behind the headstock even deeper a little bit, every year, and around this time, around November, December, October, November, December, we would have to present our yearly plan for the next year. We called it our pro forma. Now, the unwritten rule around Gibson between general managers and controllers was that at the key exec meeting, where you would present your pro forma plan to all the other general managers and the senior executives, it was wise to present a plan that had 30% growth. If you didn't, you might get beat up a bit at the key exec meeting, right?
Yeah.
Now, Frank, you and I attended a key exec meeting one time over at the Country Music Hall of Fame.
Yeah, it was definitely stressful.
It's stressful. Pressure.
Yeah.
Big pressure. Yep. Now, the other kind of unwritten rule that was talked about was if you aimed for 30% and you came in at 15, you'd be okay. Okay. So I think most people would present this big plan of 30% growth. You hit 15 and, you won't get beat up or fired, basically. I'm kind of simplifying it, but you can imagine that's a lot of pressure. If you're a general manager and your first year you hit that 30% growth, you have to do it again next year and again the next year.
Right.
And you get to the point where you go, where am I going to get this growth from?
Right. It seems impossible.
It's almost impossible, right? So you're either going to grow your market or trade market share, take market share away from your competitors, or in our case, take market share away from other divisions.
It was really hard to take it from competitors because, Gibson, really, there's no equal, So the only people making a Les Paul was the Custom Shop and the Epiphone. And, the customers want a Les Paul or a Strat or, a Fender.
Right.
Or, there's a few other brands that are quite popular, but for the most part, it's the big two, And so to take market share from Fender was almost impossible.
It's not like
those guys,
Yeah, we used to say
it's,
like who's walking into a Guitar Center looking for a Strat and walks out with a Les Paul? It doesn't. Yeah, it happens, but not a lot, right? So and people would ask Frank and I at certain NAMM shows or at Music Messa, what do you think about Fender as a competitor? And they really weren't. Our biggest competitor was a used Gibson.
Right. The used market is hard. There's so many. We've been making guitars for so long that it comes back on you.
Tough.
There's a lot out there.
Yep, it's tough.
So,
but again, if you're a general manager and you have to plan on 30% growth by making new guitars, the Les Paul Coppertop started a trend where the custom shop requested that they be the exclusive manufacturer of USA-made Les Pauls with gold top paint. So you think about this move, it's bold, it's ballsy, and it worked. They pitched it and got what they asked for. So we were informed one day, probably late 2001, hey guys, you can't make gold tops anymore.
yeah.
Custom shops making all the gold tops, right?
Well, the gold top process lent itself to them doing it. It did. I can't lie that we were that torn up in production that we lost the gold tops, because the gold was a really unique process where you mixed gold flake powder with lacquer and sprayed it on, and man, when you opened that can, it was just dust powder that was gold, and it contaminated everything.
Just getting the air everywhere, right?
Yeah. The air would be moving and it would just pick up that gold. And as you were spraying it, and once you got it wet, obviously it didn't. You put it in the lacquer and it was okay. But before that, I mean, just mixing it was hard, and it just spread all over. So in production wasn't that sad to lose it.
But from a numbers standpoint, it hurt.
Right.
We had to figure out how to replace all those lost units of production and sales, right?
That's a lot. Gold top was, 1952. That was it,
Yep.
A lot of people thought, that was it. That was before the burst got popular. The gold tops were much more popular.
Yep. And we sold a lot of classics in gold.
Yeah, that was a good guitar for us. The Les Paul 1960 classic. So yeah, it was really hard, and we tried staving that off, because you remember the classic was gold all over.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a gold top; it was gold all over. So we were like, "Oh, well, it's not a gold top; it's gold all over." Yeah, well, that didn't last. We didn't win on that one. So, but it kind of made sense because of the process. Kind of made a little sense for them to be doing it, because it was such an antiquated process. So,
didn't you have to build special rooms at some point and like move it to a certain time of the day where you sprayed it?
The finishing department, we had it set up so we had like a metallic room where we had a spray booth in there where we just did the metallics, which limited your number as well. You could only put so many in that room, and to try to hold the contamination down. And then we'd spray them on second shift, at night shift, when there wasn't much happening, and try to do them then. But it was a difficult process, and having that metallics, booth, and it just got all over the place, man. It was really bad. So,
like, you guys would come in the morning and find little specks of gold in like Alpine White Studios and Customs, right?
And everything. The scrapers, when they went to scrape the binding, they would find gold in the paint. And man, what do? You can't get it out.
Right.
There's no in that, It's you have to wash off all the finish. And we did that quite a bit, when we had, because we were sticklers about that at quality control. I used to get beat up all the time, because it just didn't look right. If you're right on the top of your guitar, a big gold speck or something in the middle, it just, every time it caught the light and refracted the light. And
oh yeah.
Like, hey, you don't see
here I am.
It's like, hey, look at me. And people you catch yourself trying to wipe it off. It's like, oh, what's this on there? And it's, so, yeah, it was a very difficult process. Tyvek suits and all that, to try to stay clean and keep that, because if it got on your clothes, it was done. You couldn't. You'd have to have a special suit, blow it off, and yeah, it was a pain. So yeah, it was kind of like I said, the finishing department was okay to see him go.
Right. They were
They were
like,
like, "Oh, right,
yeah.
yeah, no more gold."
Yep.
But in the market wise, it's hard to absorb that hit. For us, it was a lot of our production. So
All right.
that
So
we had to come up with something new.
here we are. No more gold tops. How did we end up with the copper top then?
Well, we kind of had an idea. We still wanted to do something that was metallic like that, but we wanted a new process. Gold metallic painting had changed over the years since 1952. It wasn't done the same. So there was a lot of new advancements, a lot of technology. We found this company in San Diego, TCP Global, and those guys were awesome. And they were doing all kind of metallic. They were doing pearl paints and only one step method. You could get it all in the can and just put it in the gun and shoot it. And it came out really nice. And they were doing this copper, and it was pretty close to the gold, as you can see in the picture we'll put up.
Here, I'll share that now then while you're talking.
Yeah, and you could see that it was fairly close, but it was in no way the same process. It was very easy, almost like shooting a black guitar. So we were able to just shoot the copper right over the top of the wood, and it looked great. And it kind of looks like, with the cream parts on it, it's a little orangey, but it still looked pretty good. With the black, the copper and the black pickups, it kind of all worked,
It did work, right? It looked like an aged gold top, really. Everybody who saw it agreed it looked great.
It kind of had that effect, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't the same. It wasn't the same process. Nobody was really fooled that was a gold top, and we weren't trying to do that. But the process was really easy to do, and it looked really great. So those guys knocked it out of the park with the new paint, and we just started doing the copper top, and it took off. We did like a 400 piece run probably when we started. Something like that. Did we start it with a limited run, or did we just jump it right into production? I can't remember.
We just put it on the price list, Frank. I don't think we had a limited edition on that. And then that turned into a Les Paul Studio in copper top too.
Right. With a black back. We were doing that. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. And then, well, on a side note, finding out how to do that other process led to us doing a lot of more different metallic colors too, right?
Oh, yeah. You look through the line in the early 2000s, we had a lot of different metallics. We did SG metallics and we did cream.
And like Firebirds and V's and Explorers, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we those guys were really, really good. And we looked into the old 60s Firebird colors, the champagnes and all that. I think that's what we used on Elliot Easton's Tiki Bird, was like a champagne, like Firebird color, something like that. It was like a silvery, but it was those guys' paint, and those guys could recreate that stuff without it being very difficult for us. So
yeah, if you ever see Gibson models out there with a color code like R1, that was red metallic, G1 was green metallic, B1 was blue metallic, I think. We did that like number
yellow too, yeah.
Yep. Oh, yeah, it's true. Yep. So they're all tied to that process that we learned by going to the copper top. Yep.
New paint, new process. So, good, all good things. It worked. So it was all good. And then we started talking to the guys at TCP about gold. Hey, could you guys do this with gold? And they were like, sure. So they looked into the gold top process, and they knocked it out of the park, and they brought us a can of the gold and was like, we could do this. And it's not the custom shop process, which, they were charging a lot of money for that process. And deservedly so, because it was so hard to do.
That's the way they did
You
it.
know,
Yeah.
it made it expensive. They did it like they used to, and that's the deal for the custom shop. That's what they were tasked to do, is do it the old way. You know, people wanted the old Gibsons done the right way in their mind. So that really wasn't Gibson USA's world.
No,
We had freedom to say, hey, what if we did it like this?
we can be new.
And
Yeah.
we got lots of pressure from, because we all had the same distributors.
Yep.
All the same distributors bought from Custom Shop and Epiphone as well as us. So there was no gold top in the middle. Epiphone kept making their gold tops because they were polyurethane and polyester, and that wasn't the old process. So they let Epiphone, I think, kept going.
Yes.
And just because they didn't really care, because it had a different headstock. Custom Shop was like, well, they're not making the same guitar. It doesn't have our headstock, because we had the same headstock, basically.
Correct.
And as we strive to make our guitars better, it infringed on what they were doing in their mind,
Well, yeah.
So
you bring up a good point, because eventually, and this kind of started it, where we felt like we were fighting over the same customer, or
right,
almost the same customer, right? So you had Gibson USA in the middle. Epiphone was constantly trying to come up and take our customers away from the bottom, and Custom Shop's coming at us from the top, trying to take our customers from the top. So we were constantly getting squeezed in the middle. That's what it felt like, at least, right? And here we are trying to fight back, but coming in from the top and the bottom.
Right. But we had to make room for everybody, in a sense.
Correct.
So that's why a lot of the guitars of the month and the guitars of the week came about, because we needed to have something to make that wasn't, Wine Red Studios, and
Right.
we were doing good with all that, and we had a lot of successes with other stuff. Thanks to Jack Black, we made 1 million SGs, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, after School of Rock, forget it.
Right.
Yep.
So there was things that came around that helped us float the ship, so to speak. There was plenty of stuff that came around, but it wasn't enough to get 30% every year.
No.
There wasn't a School of Rock every year. We
tried like hell, though.
Yeah. And then Slash came along and helped us out,
Yep.
And Slash really bridged all 3 lines,
Yep. Well, that's for another episode, when we launched 3 different Slashes at the same time.
Right.
That was something else.
But I mean, there always has to be the quest to find something to keep it going, keep the production going, and you never know what you're going to hit, but the Coppertop was something that was close enough to the original, and it filled the price point that wasn't being filled at the time.
Filled the gap.
And it survived, it survived this little world until, we had the distributors, ultimately your customers, who drives the business. And we had distributors like Yamaha and Guitar Center and the like. And they would be like, we want this, we need this, so we were
well, at that point they were saying, because if you wanted a gold top, you had to buy the historic collection. So of course Yamaha and Rossetti and AMI down in Australia were like, can we get a cheaper gold top?
Yeah, and I want 200 of them.
Right.
I want to buy 250, gold tops. And the Custom Shop was doing, 10 a day at most or so, They're very limited production. So some of these big giant distributors, you're running the whole, country of Japan.
Oh yeah, they take 400 they take 400 in the blink of an eye. Yeah.
Yeah, you needed more than 10 guitars. That wasn't going to cut it,
Yeah.
So I think that's why we went back to doing gold again with the new process with the TCP gold. And we were allowed to do that because it wasn't the Custom Shop process. And really, I don't think Custom Shop could do more if they had to anyway. It became a problem for them.
They probably took a lot of back orders that they were having trouble filling, right? Because it still took a longer time to make that historic version. So, yeah. So eventually we know we got the gold tops back. We're not exactly sure how it happened, but we're pretty sure it was probably for a special run for a distributor. That makes the most sense, right?
Right. Yeah. Yamato could pretty much get what they wanted. And they were buying a huge number of guitars per month.
Yep.
You know, so much so that they even had inspectors at our plant. You know,
that's true. Yep.
Went through them before they shipped them over. You know, and getting their stuff together, because they would get containers at a time. You know.
Yep. Multiple.
So, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It was. So it was good time to be there, and we had a good time. And we were able to solve a need, bridge the gap in our production, and I can't remember if that, you know, how we did that year when we switched back. But
I think we did fine. We had a good run there for a number of years, so I think we did fine. Yep.
Yeah, we did. We were going good until we weren't. Yep.
So anyway, so that's the untold story of the Les Paul Classic Coppertop. We're trying to remember all we can about it. So if you fact check us, we might not be 100% accurate on everything, but it's still, that's the gist of the story. And quite frankly, no pun intended, we have a million more stories that we're happy to share with you guys. So this is our first episode. We hope you liked it. Please click the subscribe button and click that notification bell. We would appreciate that.
Yes,
Frank
please.
and I have an email address set up. It's behindtheheadstock@gmail.com. Please send us your questions. Send us any topics you want us to cover, any episode ideas, or I don't know, if you want to hire us to come to a guitar show and talk about it, we are available, right?
Yeah. We could play too.
That's true. We can play. Frank's a much better player than I am, though.
But anyway, thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. So
yep, we got a lot more to come.
Go Behind the Headstock with Kevin and Frank, two ex-Gibson employees talking about guitars and the guitar industry with an inside perspective.